She's walking toward the guard. The crowd murmured, a few phones lifted, but she didn't take a photo. She knelt, a small white envelope in her hand. Without a word, she placed it gently at the guard's boots. Silence. The guard didn't move, not a blink, not a shift. The woman stood up and walked away. Someone near the rope whispered, "Was that a letter?" That letter wasn't a prank. It wasn't left behind for attention or as a stunt for cameras. And it wasn't even meant for the soldier standing there. It was something far more personal, far more final. It was a goodbye, a farewell written for someone who never made it to that post, but always dreamed he would. She didn't expect anyone to read it. But someone did, and when the right eyes saw what was written inside, it didn't just stir sympathy. It moved one of the most powerful men in Britain to act. Before we reveal what the letter said, tap subscribe and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Because some words don't just speak, they echo. Corporal Ellis Rowe had been in uniform for 10 years, but this was his first month posted to the Queen's Guard. He stood like he'd been carved there, back straight, eyes steady, not a flicker of movement, even when the noise outside the gates grew louder than it should. Among his regiment, Ellis wasn't known for stories or smiles. He was known for stillness, precision, the kind of silence that came not from indifference, but from discipline. His father had worn the uniform before him, a soldier, like Ellis. But cancer took him before Ellis enlisted, before he could see the son he raised take his place in the same boots. On the inside of Ellis's jacket, there was a letter. Old, folded, a little soft at the edges. His father had written it on his final hospital night. Ellis had carried it every day since, but he had never opened it. "Not yet," he once said quietly. "Some things you don't read until you're ready." He never shared that story, not with his mates, not with command. But it was there, folded beneath brass buttons and scarlet wool. A silent weight, one he stood under proudly. Sometimes people asked why the guard never spoke, why they didn't smile, didn't flinch. Ellis had only ever answered once. "Sometimes," he said, "I don't speak, because I'm standing for someone who can't." The envelope stayed at the base of the post for over an hour, unmoving, unnoticed by most, but not by Ellis. He saw it the second it was placed. How could he not? Every movement near him registered, every shift in weight, every sound in the crowd, every flicker of motion, all filtered through 10 years of training. And yet he didn't react. Not even with his eyes. Protocol demanded composure. And Ellis had never broken it. Not for rain, not for ridicule, not for protesters yelling in his face. Stillness, for him, wasn't a rule. It was a vow. And so he stood, unmoved, while the envelope rested there in silence. It didn't flutter. It wasn't decorated, just a plain white rectangle placed gently at the tip of his boots. Most would have missed it, but not Ellis. When the shift ended and the guards rotated, the cleanup protocol began. Any object left near post had to be documented and cleared. Usually it was gum wrappers, selfies dropped from a shaky grip, or notes written by children who thought the guard would sneak a smile. But this envelope was different. The handwriting on the front was careful, centered, measured. 4 words, written in soft blue ink. To the one still standing, it was handed to the duty officer, opened as required. Inside, a single folded sheet of paper, the writing just as neat. No smudges, no crossed-out words. The letter began, "My son died before he could wear this uniform. He trained, he dreamed, he never got to post." The room went quiet. The officer continued reading, slower now. "Today I came to watch someone else stand in his place, so I could say goodbye." No request, no complaint, no contact details, just a name at the bottom. Margaret Lane. The letter was refolded slowly, more from instinct than regulation. The silence in the room stretched. No one said anything. A younger guard clearing boots nearby looked over and asked quietly, "Sir, was it a threat?" The officer shook his head. "No," he said, "it's something else." He slid the letter back into its envelope and placed it gently on the corner of his desk. Not in a file, not in the bin. Just there. Ellis never asked about it, but later that night, as he removed his gloves and unfastened his coat with practiced care, his eyes flicked, just once, toward the white envelope resting untouched under a paperweight. Then, without a word, he reached into the inside lining of his uniform and checked the spot where his father's sealed letter always sat, tucked between the threads. Still there, still unread, still waiting, one letter never opened, another never meant to be answered. Yet somehow, both had finally been understood. The letter didn't disappear. It didn't get folded into a binder or tossed into the usual miscellaneous tray. The officer who read it sat still for a moment longer than he meant to, then slid it back into its envelope and placed it at the center of his desk. Face up. No stamp. No return address. Just 4 words staring back at him, to the one still standing. He didn't speak to anyone about it that night. But early the next morning, he walked into regimental headquarters and handed it to the commander without explanation. "You should read this," he said. "That's all. No summary. No context. Just the envelope." It moved again, quietly, from the hands of one officer to another. No one made copies. No one scanned it or uploaded a report. They simply read it, paused, and passed it on, like it was carrying something they didn't want to interrupt. Eventually, it landed on the desk of a palace liaison, someone assigned to bridge the quiet space between ceremonial units and the royal household. That man read the letter at his desk in full, leaned back slowly in his chair, and then picked up a secure line. 2 hours later, the letter was in the hands of Prince William's personal aide. He didn't email it. He didn't summarize it. He walked it in. In a quiet corridor, just off a royal meeting room, he handed the envelope directly to the prince. Prince William read it once, without commentary. Then he read it again, slower. He turned the letter over, saw the name, and traced it with his thumb, like it carried more weight than just ink. There was no phone number, no request, no hint of anyone expecting a reply. And that's when he looked up and said, "She didn't write it for a response, but she's going to get one." Margaret Lane never expected a call. She hadn't left a number, hadn't written for attention. Her letter was a whisper into the silence, a final goodbye, nothing more. But less than a week after she placed it at the foot of the Royal Guard, a phone rang in her small cottage on the edge of Kent. The voice on the other end was calm, polite, and official, but not cold. They introduced themselves as part of the Royal Liaison Office. No camera crews, no media. Just a quiet request. Would she be willing to visit the palace? She said yes, though she didn't quite understand why. The morning of the visit, she wore her son's favorite scarf, the one he took with him to training. She arrived alone. No entourage, no fanfare. Just one staff member waiting at a side entrance. No press, no flashbulbs. She was escorted inside through private halls lined with silence. At the end of one corridor, a door opened. Prince William was already standing. No guards, no cameras, no photographers hiding in corners. He greeted her by name, took her hand, thanked her for the letter, and for the son who never got to finish the path he started. Margaret nodded, unsure what to say. She hadn't expected this. Not from anyone, let alone a prince. But William didn't treat it like charity. He treated it like duty. He walked her through the ceremonial wing, past displays of medals and archives. Eventually, he asked if she'd like to visit the guards' barracks, not the public tour, but the real place, the place her son would have lived. She nodded again, quietly. Inside, it smelled like polish and discipline. Uniforms hung in neat rows, boots lined up at the foot of tightly made beds, and at the far end of the hallway, standing just outside the inspection room, was Corporal Ellis Rowe. He wasn't in full uniform, just barracks dress. Still tall, still composed. Margaret recognized him instantly. There was no formal introduction, no handshake, no staged words. She simply walked up, and for a moment they looked at each other. "Thank you," she whispered. "You stood for him today." He nodded once. That was all. The next time Corporal Ellis Rowe stepped onto post, everything looked the same. Same gravel underfoot, same slow drift of tourists behind the rope, same shine on his boots, inspected twice before leaving the barracks. But inside, something had changed. Beneath his jacket, tucked behind the folded edge of his regulation notebook, were 2 letters. One had been there for years. His father's, still unopened, still waiting. The other had just joined it. A copy of Margaret Lane's message, carefully reprinted on cream parchment. He had asked for it quietly, with no request for ceremony. The quartermaster had handed it to him in silence. One for the man who stood before me, one for the one who never got to. That's what Ellis had said when he placed both papers inside his uniform. The phrase wasn't written anywhere, but someone had heard it. The palace updated the ceremonial registry later that month. One line was added beneath the list of active guards, in honor of Thomas Lane, posted in spirit. The name would never be read aloud at roll call, but it would never be forgotten. At the training hall, inside a small corridor lined with photos of guards long gone, the Ministry of Defense added a modest plaque. No announcement, no post on social media. Just a few words carved into polished wood. To those who never stood, but were never forgotten. And just beneath it, in smaller font, T. Lane, Recruit. Class of 2022, no medals, no rank. Just memory, preserved the only way that mattered, by someone else who understood what it meant to stand in silence. Corporal Rowe stood post again. Still, silent, but no longer alone. The crowd behind the rope moved like it always did. Tourists pointing, someone laughing, a phone clicking 3 photos in a row. The rhythm of the day didn't change, but something in it had shifted. Just beyond the line, standing quietly in a soft grey coat, was Margaret Lane. Her hands clasped in front of her, one lifted to her chest. She didn't wave, she didn't call out. She just watched, and he didn't move, not even then. But somewhere behind the stillness, behind the polished brass and fixed expression, he felt her presence. He didn't speak, but he stood, and that was enough. Have you ever said goodbye through someone else? Or found your peace in someone who never even knew your name? Hit subscribe for more stories where silence carries memory, and share this with someone who's ever stood in place, for someone they loved.